This is the Trades Union Hall in Odessa, Ukraine. And this area around it is what's called Kulikovo Field. 3 days ago, when we came here for the May 2nd memorial service organized by the Mothers Committee, the Council of Mothers, this whole area was blocked off to the public. We weren't not allowed to be here. And guarding this area were what's called the Azov Battalion, neo-Nazi battalion that has been incorporated into the Ukrainian National Guard and is now being trained by U.S. Special Forces units from Fort Carson, Colorado, at a base in western Ukraine.
It's been a great day. Incredibly impressed to see what the American Special Forces are doing with some of our NATO allies in support of the establishment of Ukraine's new Special Forces units.
So it was ironic that on that day, on May 2nd, the people keeping the public from having access to this building, the scene of the crime, if you will, from the May 2nd, 2014 massacre, where more than 50 people were killed and more than 200 were injured. The people keeping the public from this place were actually neo-Nazis protecting this space from the people, memorializing the attacks by neo-Nazis 2 years ago. What happened 2 years ago is that just after the coup d'etat in Kiev that was organized by the United States, Victoria Nuland, Assistant Secretary of State, working for Hillary Clinton at the time, she bragged that the U.S. spent $5 billion on this project of the coup d'etat in Ukraine that threw out an elected government. The first thing that the new regime did was to outlaw the speaking of Russian in Ukraine. And a significant number of people in Ukraine speak Russian as their first language. And so all over the country, people were holding peaceful rallies and marches and gathering petition signatures for a referendum saying they wanted to be able to have a federated state where they would have local autonomy and could speak whatever language they wished and could elect their own leaders rather than have them appointed by Kiev. And so here on May 2nd, 2014, the people gathered what we call tabling in our country. They gathered with booths out here collecting signatures because a lot of the public is walking through this beautiful park. And they were attacked by several thousand neo-Nazis who were bussed in, and many believe paid for by the US, by the CIA, by the National Endowment for Democracy, by George Soros's organization, and other such things. But anyway, they attacked this spot and set it afire. And so the people that were running this tabling operation ran inside the building to protect themselves, closed the doors, and then those same neo-Nazis then took Molotov cocktails and began throwing them through the windows and at the doors, and soon the building was on fire. And the people inside were consumed by the smoke, and they came to the windows to try to get some air. And there are videos now all over YouTube showing people on the ground, these neo-Nazis with guns shooting at the people in the windows. And it wasn't long that people were actually jumping out of windows because the fire was coming close, the smoke was killing them. And when they hit the ground, these neo-Nazis took bats and were beating them to death. And so this went on for hours. And in fact, when the fire department tried to come, the neo-Nazis blocked the fire department from having access to the building for several hours. And there are all kinds of pictures that behind the building were lines and lines of police doing nothing, just standing there. So clearly someone had to have given the order that they not stop this massacre that was going on that day. It was a tragedy. And up in one of the rooms in the building, There was a cry, it's visible on the videotapes, of a woman yelling and screaming for her life, and eventually it stopped. And it was later discovered that there was a pregnant woman upstairs in one of the building that was killed. The Nazis actually, some of them went inside the building themselves through a side door and went in, were kicking down doors as people tried to protect themselves, and were murdering people inside the building that were unarmed, defenseless against this onslaught by these Nazis. Well, to this day, in spite of the voluminous evidence, video and photographic evidence of who actually committed these crimes, no one has been found guilty. And there have been repeated calls for investigation, for an independent international investigation of these crimes by these fascists, by these Nazis, that now, to a certain extent, are in control of this country of Ukraine. And as well, today, in the very eastern part of Ukraine, along the Russian border, entire sections of what they call the Donbass region, Donetsk and Lugansk, the big cities along that region, are under constant attack by the Ukrainian army, funded and directed by the United States government. And so fundamentally you have to ask the question, what's going on? Why is all this happening here? Why is Ukraine being thrown into this chaos? Why is this happening? Why is the United States behind this whole situation? US and parts of European countries, NATO, why are they behind it? And the answer, bottom line, is to create chaos along the Russian border, to destabilize Russia in order for the US to force regime change in Moscow like they've done in so many other places. Right here, this is the very spot where people were tabling. They had like tents here, and they were tabling, gathering signatures from the public as they passed through here, calling for a referendum. That's all they were doing, peacefully gathering signatures. And then they were chased into the building, and you can see the doors as we're now closer that are burned out, and you can even see still a few broken windows. The front of the building is now barricaded off, and there are some flowers laying in front of the barricade that people have put. It was a horrendous, horrendous tragedy. So finally, I think it's important to get back to the question of why. Why is the United States doing all of these activities, not only here in Ukraine, but throughout Eastern Europe? You know, at the time that the Soviet Union collapsed, the US government promised Mikhail Gorbachev, then the leader of the Soviet Union, that NATO would not expand 1 centimeter towards the east, towards Russia. But of course, that promise has been repeatedly violated, first by Bill Clinton and then successive presidents. And now today, under the Obama administration, NATO is moving right up to the border of Russia, into Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, throughout the entire region. And clearly, probably, at some point, even into Ukraine. Moving missile defense systems that are key elements in US first strike attack planning that would put in danger Russia's nuclear retaliatory capability, giving the US a quote-unquote first strike advantage in a war, something that Russia fears. And as a result, Russia has said that arms control disarmament talks are out of the question. How can they dare reduce their number of nuclear weapons when the United States is encircling them with so-called missile defense systems that are, again, key elements in US Pentagon first strike attack planning? And when Russia has military exercises inside of their own country in response, they're accused by the United States and NATO of being provocative. Well, what's more provocative than these US and NATO deployments right on the Russian border? What if you reverse the whole situation and it was Russia or China putting bases in Canada or Mexico? The United States would go ballistic. The Cuban Missile Crisis all over again. But when we do it here in this part of the world, it's no big deal. And in fact, the American people don't even know it's happening. This is the contradiction that so many people in this part of the world Good activists here in Ukraine, peace people, are crying out to those of us from around the world. Can you see what's going on? Can you put your ear to the railroad tracks and hear the train coming?